what I might do if I was to have a Chief, and I probably will, is I would take the Chief, keep the lower bars of the standard type Chief, the Chief Dark Horse, but put this forward mounting on there. Maybe bring it up a smidge more than the other bars, maybe a smidge. And then I'd have the perfect bike, but this one, man, I would not mind taking this one out the way it is either.
And upon reviewing that first video I did of the Chiefs back 3 years ago during their introduction, that younger Rabid Hedgehog was both a liar and told the truth, because I will have a Chief, and I will have a Chief, and that's exactly what I did. The 116 engine is on there. Of course, we went over this the last time I did a video when I first purchased this one last year. Now, the one thing is now, bought it in July of last year, July 26th. We are coming up on the first full year, but now I've got more than 5,000 miles on this machine, and more modifications have come since even that video as well, because the crash bars are new with the highway pegs, and that's going to be a new part of it as well. I also, but not here right now, I also have a Sport Chief seat that plugs in, and hence why I have that style of screw now. So that way I can drop the Sport Chief seat on there for longer rides. So, how was that younger Rabid Hedgehog a liar? Well, I said that I would probably keep the bars a little bit lower, but I would go forward control. Now I put 10-inch minis on there, not the 5-inch mids, which is what the bobber had. And in that video, to be real, I liked the bobber quite a bit better. And as I stated in the last video, this particular Chief, had some work that needed to be done. And I liked the bobber better at that time. But now we can see what has happened over the course of the 5,000-ish miles, a little bit more. Floorboards are now added, which is a more forward control versus the mid-mount pegs. I said in the last video I'd like to keep the mid-mount pegs, but after a little bit of time and sitting there in the saddle, you start to realize things a little bit more as you go. So I put on the floorboards very recently, actually a few days ago, not even a week yet. And I have to say that is the best change I have made so far to the Chief. And I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say this very honestly. The stock Chief does have a lot of work it needs to have done to make it a comfortable long-range motorcycle. Before I get into those details, let me give a shout out to our sponsors today, AGVSportUSA, for providing us with the riding gear that keeps us safe. I want to thank Doug Crawford and USA Synthetics for the AMSOIL that protects our engines. And I want to thank Law Tigers of Oklahoma for fighting for us in the courtroom whenever something goes wrong. But they're riding with us right now, giving back to the community, doing some good as well. So we want to thank Law Tigers of Oklahoma and give everybody a shout out that sponsors this channel. So what do you need to do to a base Chief that would make it right? Well, for my height, and I'm 6 foot tall, with a 32-inch inseam, I know the shadow doesn't give it justice, but I do have a very long trunk. Shortish arms, too. I'm kind of a freak. Anyway, the first part is the seat. The stock seat on these things are way down here. And I mean way down here. So they attach here, and they come down through right there. The floating seat that I have on board actually gives me a better ride height, about 2.5, almost 3 inches, maybe even a little more, than the stock seat. That puts me in a better position. Now, the Sport Chief seat is a little bit thicker, but that is still a couple inches taller than the Sport Chief seat. But the Sport Chief seat does come with that nice block, and I'll get a picture of it because I've got pictures of this one with it on there. But, that Sport Chief seat gives it that backing that it needs, whereas the stock seat is just way too flat. With this much torque, this thing causes you to slide all over the place, slide up to the fender, and not a very comfortable way either. Even with the mid-mounts, man, it's just, I don't know. Something about the way I feel, I'm cramped on there, and it just didn't quite work. Where the Chief Bobber hops in and absolutely does better in terms of seating position right out of the box. In fact, I think, to be real, the way Indian's doing it right now, I would prefer them to drop the Chief and make the Bobber the same price and make it the base. Because let's face it, a change in handlebars and a change in foot peg position does not change the price out of the factory. So do something about that, because this one is great after a ton of work. And let's be real, yes, having a blank canvas is great if you have the assets to work on it. I am fortunate in that I am twin incomes and I have no kids. Therefore, I have the assets to build a motorcycle. However, if you're young, you're looking for your first bike, and you buy a Chief, it's going to take time, effort, and money to make it right. And the problem is, in this generation, for millennials, we hate that. We want it to be right first. And then we make modifications to our liking in the future. That's actually how we do things. We just want it to be done. We don't want to play with it anymore. So that's a thing. I don't mind it as bad, but I know others that will approach this motorcycle, and on the first ride, the first thing that they say, well, that's a little bit uncomfortable. And it's not a lie. It is definitely not a lie. Even on my first ride, I liked it enough because I saw the potential, but I did state that I would make changes almost immediately. On a motorcycle, I like to ride them, and I would like to make changes gradually over time that are not necessary, but to my liking. Just like I said, I'm a millennial. That's how things roll. My FTR out of the box is totally and was totally fine. I decided after a little bit of time, I'd like to go ahead and raise the bars a little bit. It was a cheap addition. I also wanted to add heated grips. Cheapish addition compared to what performance modifications, all that stuff is. And then I added some bags and some other things, just like this one. No performance modifications at all were needed, just storage and, some stuff. Well, this one's a whole lot different because I had to add storage, seating, foot controls, and handlebars. So I did a whole lot more on this one. But once again, no performance modifications, because to me, performance is okay. I stated that in the very first video. I stated that in the last video. That 116 is ridiculous for this particular ride. It's a very lightweight motorcycle compared to others that have that engine, and therefore does just fine. But again, I would say that the Bobber has the upper hand against the Chief, and I think that should be the base. You go from Chief, well, we'll just call the new the Chief Bobber, Chief, and Sport Chief, and then Super Chief. That would be okay with me. I don't think we need that many other additions. I think this one can go and start fresh with the baseline being the Bobber, because that one's pretty good out of the box. And that's just a solid thought after all these miles and after all these changes. You know, it's just it just becomes a preference after that. Are there some people that can handle the ergonomics of the Base Chief? Absolutely. Especially people who are not as tall. But the problem is that it still comes up to rider comfort, because I've seen some shorter people than I and taller people than I. They both come on this thing. They got their mid-mounts. So I'm going to put my foot back where about the mid-mounts were. You can see my knees and thighs are coming above the tank just like they were before. Of course, these are actually a little lower than mid-mounts, so that does kind of level them out. But, yeah. Let's see, about right in there. That's pretty dang cramped. There's a lot of people that are leaning forward, and that is just too awkward of a rider triangle to throw at you at a $15,000 price point or more. So that's going to be my honest thing about having this as a base Chief. They just need a little bit more work, or just gone altogether and let the bobber take its place. Now, after the fact, with my large feet, I like a floorboard that's, well, they're nice and large, but I can kind of slide my foot around now. Can even kind of bank over like that on these highway bars and pegs. So I can kind of move around, have a lot more, just a lot more movement. Got isolators now. You know, those big rubber floorboards help out with that. And now, when I'm up, I can stretch out. I can have that leg really get down there. It just feels a whole lot better. And that was the one thing I said. I need forward-mounted controls. Well, essentially I did that. But now I have the space to move as well. And that really does help this one out. But another thing that helps it out is this tractor seat, is that it stands up so tall. Even with the Sport Chief seat on there, there's a little pinch because of how low you sit on this motorcycle. Little pinch to get back down and go in that hip over there on the right side for me. Not the greatest for a long ride, but I think the Chief Bobber addresses that a little bit better than the changes on this one. Now this tractor seat, yeah, it's not the most comfortable thing in the world, but at least it addresses the pinch inside the hip and all the other things that I had a problem with. So that's the good news. All right, now that we got her started up here, you can see now 59, 51.5. So a further more than 4,000 miles from the last review that I did, and more time to really think about what this Chief is like and how it rides and everything. So let's go ahead and take it for a ride. Now, one thing's for sure when it comes to the Chief. It is a burly, muscular motorcycle to ride. There is plenty of torque and power on tap. Something around 92 horsepower and 119 foot-pounds of torque or so. A little detuned from the other 116 series engines because this bike is much lighter than those 116 series motorcycles like the Chieftain and the Springfield and some of those, and Roadmaster. But this thing has incredibly good behavior when it comes to rideability. In sport mode, it can be very twitchy. If you're trying to use this motorcycle in slow speed maneuvering, take it off of sport mode. You want to do that for the sheer fact that if you're in it, it's so twitchy, it just doesn't level itself out very well. Even if you've got good clutch control, it's still very overpowering how fast the throttle response is. So if you need a little bit more finesse control, you can put it into the standard mode, and that way it is a whole lot better to control. And this one will do the MSF 20-foot box just fine. There's no issue with doing that, even with floorboards on it.
turns very well, and it's very well balanced despite its size. I will always praise Polaris's engineers on their remarkable ability to make a chassis work very well. I do like the fact that the floorboards have actually added a little bit more lean angle. On turns that I was going 40 and scraping the peg on and almost ripping it off, I could show you a picture of what my pegs look like after the 5,000 miles. This one can now do that speed without touching down. At least so far, I haven't touched down. That's a good thing. Oklahoma doesn't have too many turns that can make you touch down, but where I did it well, and it scraped everything down to a point. In fact, my right one's the more chewed up one versus the left, because most of our cloverleaf turns and stuff like that coming off the interstates is where those scrapes would happen, because that's about the only place they could happen. There's a few left-hand sweepers that are up there per my last video, where I was able to touch down the left side a few times, but I would touch down left and right as I went through the turns. But in Oklahoma, most of the things that we get is wide open, straight line roads. And this bike does excel at this. It just settles into a nice rhythm and a smooth rhythm. You can see barely any shake coming out of these mirrors looking back. With the 10-inch risers, or 10-inch mini ape, excuse me, I could see quite a bit better than in the stock placement as well, because I'm not as crunched down and I don't have to crank my head over. I simply just have to dart my eyes over to see them. So I don't have to actually physically kind of pull back and look at the mirror. I just have to look. And that to me is a better thing. But again, it goes back to why build it like that? Why build it where everything needs to be changed? I get that that's going to be money made. However, sometimes, especially now, you got to lock into who your people are and who your buyers are, and not try to cater to the past. Because Harley has catered to the past for so long, they're becoming very irrelevant very fast. There are still people out there who do covet thy Harley. That is for sure. However, it is becoming less and less as their sales figures go further and further down. And remember, they're only number one in the American market. Do not listen to Harley's propaganda when it comes to sales of motorcycles. When you only sell 190-something thousand motorcycles in a year, and you're claiming number one, you are very far away from number one, because the others that are doing it are selling near millions or over millions, because Honda's doing that. Several Chinese manufacturers are doing that. You know, if you go down the line, there's going to be many, many more that have many, many more sales. Indian is starting to catch up in the U.S. market. Harley has lost so much market share that they're less than 50% now. And it's for good reason that Indian is coming. It's because for now, they do have very many motorcycles that come out of the box great. Or at least if there's changes, they're minimal to keep it pretty cheap and to make somebody still attracted to it. Because if you don't have to do performance upgrades, that takes a ton of money out of the equation. And if you're forced to do performance upgrades to make it even relevant, it makes people kind of mad over time. Especially when they throw $20,000 at it and they're whipped by a bike off the showroom floor fresh. You know, no changes, no nothing. But I will say this about what Indian and Harley need to do to make things a little bit better. They both have building platforms on their websites. and you can build your motorcycle and do everything that you want to with it, but the point about it is every single one of those add-ons adds to the price of the motorcycle, because they're going to end up being dealer installed, not factory installed. In my opinion, I don't mind the factory being able to put some of these parts on there. So if you go to Indian's website or Harley's website, you configure your motorcycle to your dream position and everything, then it comes out cheaper because the factory installed most of these options. Well, that takes away some from the dealer. Well, keep the dealer in the loop with some of the performance and the exhaust and everything like that, because let's face it, exhaust can't be done out of the factory, because that has to be done in-house because of EPA regulations and stuff like that for vehicles sold. However, when it comes to simpler things like foot controls, handlebars, and other things that I can tell you every dealer in the world right now has an extreme surplus of takeoffs, it would be better for the environment, it'd be better for the customer, and it would be better for the company overall to allow a motorcycle to be configured to the rider's triangle, to the rider's seating position, to the rider themselves out of the factory, and then allow them to do the performance and other tidbits outside. And why would it be cheaper? Because a motorcycle needs a handlebar. So if you're taking one handlebar off and sticking another one on there, or cable sets or anything like that that's gonna be just put in at the factory anyway, whoop-de-flippin'-do. It should be included in the MSRP of the motorcycle, because those parts were required, and it costs no more to make any other bar or cable set than it did the other. So freaking do good by the environment, do good by the people to let them get it the way they want it first. You will get a bigger following doing that than charging on top of the motorcycle everything, and then having all this extra takeoff junk that's gonna be scrapped or thrown away, or, you know, whatever, or stored for Kingdom Come forever. You know, that just needs to be out of the equation. And then let the dealers work on the performance side, let the dealers work on the maintenance side, and all the good stuff like that. It's pretty simple. I know there'll be a lot of people saying it's not that simple, but in my mind, that's how it could work. And it would make these motorcycles greater, especially to my generation. Because everybody wants to know how to get a millennial to do something. Just present it in truth, and just present it the way it needs to be. It's pretty dang simple. We're not asking for much, we're just asking it be right. Because we don't have the extra income to spend it on anything else. Let us at least get it, because if we get it, then we're gonna sing the praises of your brand, and then we're gonna, as we finally age into money, we'll finally start buying the way others did. We're just not doing that as fast of a rate. Anyway, let me get off my soapbox there and let's talk about this ride. So on the interstate, in wind, got a pretty good kind of crosswind today. This motorcycle holds very, very well on the interstate. After some good preload and some adjustments to the shocks, I am enjoying the ride quite a bit better. For some reason, I didn't preload this thing ever. And it was always a little choppy, but after working on that over time, I managed to get it dialed in perfectly to the way I ride, to the weight I carry, and all the weight that I am as well. And it just smoothly burbles along and holds its line. It doesn't get really thrown off or anything like that. It's beautiful. So the 3-inch suspension travel and the 5.2-inch suspension travel up front is a good combination. Am I still thinking about upgrading to the Fox piggyback shocks that will give me 4 inches of travel in the rear? Absolutely, that is a thought in my mind to do. I finally got to ride a Scout Rogue with the optional piggyback shocks that can be bought and installed. And that was game changer. You know, feeling how that one was compared to just the regular coilovers. Of course, the Scouts do not benefit from the additional inch of suspension travel. They only have 2 inches on the Bobber series, like the Rogue. And another thing that I noticed is that the Bobber is a little too chatty in the front end for those good shocks. So, well, at least Scout Bobber, excuse me. It's not the Chief on this one. But a very similar shock platform that the Chief uses. And yeah, it makes me go, okay, this one has a better front end. It doesn't chat as much. It holds its line better. I bet you those 4.5 or that 4-inch travel in the back will be perfect for this thing. But even with the big tractor seat on there, you know, it's not uncomfortable. I could take this thing out for 4 or 5 hours at a time and not really be beat up. And it's pretty impressive considering how rock solid that seat is with no give on it at all. I would still like to see a better seat like this that gives us a little bit more, you know, height. I think that's the big thing. I'd rather not be sitting down in the motorcycle. I'd rather be sitting on top of the motorcycle. And that way it is a little bit better platform. And me up in the air like this versus the Sport Chief seat or even the stock seat, this is way better. And the seat is actually pretty comfortable in that respect, especially having the forward mounted floorboards installed. And these 10-inch minis. I never thought I would like 10-inch minis. I thought the 5-inch would suffice. These are fantastic to have. That makes this motorcycle a very good tracking and very flickable rig, despite the fact that it is a cruiser. And you can tell I've been going over some fairly broken roads here today. And there is a little chop, of course, as always, but that is the thing about being here. You're always going to have that. Unless you're on an extremely good suspension motorcycle like the Moto Guzzi V85, which does not compare to this one because it's a completely different class of motorcycle. The one thing I really like about Indian, especially over this 5,000 miles, is the ergonomics. Everything is so well placed and so indexable by just finger reach that you know where everything is. Cruise control and set, slow down and speed up, pretty easy to do without looking. Controlling your Bluetooth, if it's all connected, is real easy to do. Volume, skip your track, go into your menu system. Everything is so easy to do. One thing I failed to mention, I believe back in the second review, because the first review I did was actually prototype, and it was running prototype software and everything was not quite ready to roll yet. But I want to say that they got all that fixed. This ride command is very snappy. You can see I can just press, glove and all, and it all changes. And you can see it going through very quickly with the left-hand trigger as well. And there you go. It's just real easy to get everything changed depending on what your style of interaction is. And I love the redundancy that is built into these motorcycles versus many others that you have to interact with only one type of, you know, button or something. Because some of them are strictly handlebar controls but no touchscreen. Some of them have just a touchscreen and limited handlebar controls. And you know, it's just nice to have all the redundancy, and it makes it easy for the rider to appreciate that. And with the upcoming 2025 Scouts having this same ride command system, the people moving into the Scout line with the tech packages are going to be very happy with that interaction. I can guarantee you that. but I do not know fully what their control surface is going to look like. I do believe it is going to be closer to the FTR's style versus the Chiefs, though. And that's actually not a big deal either, because the FTR had very, very good ergonomics and very good controls as well. And you could do everything through a gloved finger and index it perfectly. And that's what people need to get right with motorcycle riding. Harley's new 4-ways with barely any brake or anything like that on each side is trash. You can't feel it and index it with your finger. I know some people say you get used to it, but it takes a ton of time to do that. And that's just not a pleasant riding experience. You want to be able to hop on and control it pretty quickly. And that way you can start using your motorcycle to your, riding pleasure and not have to worry about anything of that nature. Now you can see, nice straight down. I've got my feet slightly pulled back right now, but like I said, I can move them forward. I can move them backwards on these floorboards. With that isolation, it takes a lot of the road bumps and other things away. And most importantly, the wind has been quenched, because we have wind, and with pegs, your feet will try to blow off, especially feet my size. And it is good to not have an additional point of wind pushing back on me. And it makes this ride so much better. So do I regret buying the Chief after 5,000 miles of service and multiple changes? No, I do not. I do wish that it started from a different position where it wouldn't have required so many changes in less than a year. But again, these changes were worth it in the long run. And if you bought a Chief, don't give up on her. They are pretty dependable, first off. As a motorcycle, they're going to last you a long time. But they are also highly configurable. And you can make this rig into one that fits you perfectly, that can last you a literal lifetime. And if that's the case, then you made a pretty good investment in the long run. Because if you're happy and this motorcycle lasts you for a long time to come, therefore you have done it right. And if you're not trading it off and getting all that negative equity rolled into motorcycle after motorcycle after motorcycle, then that's a better feeling than constantly needing to change because you can't find the right one. But again, I do wish and recommend for Indian and for everybody to really change how they do it. I mean, I appreciate freaking Kawasaki to this day for having the Ergo Fit on the Vulcan S, because that's game changing, man. You don't pay anything extra, at least at the dealers here. If there are dealers charging you, what the heck. But you are not paying anything extra to have that motorcycle configured into your riding triangle. So they will change the pegs for you. They'll change the handlebar out. They'll change the seat. They'll make a combination of sorts or whatever they need to do to make it right for you before it leaves. And that right there is the model everybody should be freaking listening to. But here we are, stuck with a blank canvas that needs quite a bit of work to make it right for certain riders. And probably most riders, because so far, almost every rider I've ever had on this thing, being that I do this gig now that I'm working at an Indian dealership, they pretty much all say the same thing. Man, it's so cramped. And that's from somebody who's 5'6" all the way up to 6'3", and taller even probably. And that should say something. They get on I tell them to hop on the bobber. Bobber's perfect. A little pop, nice thing, whatever. That's where everybody thinks it's at, and you know what? I'm not going to disagree with them. I think that is something that India needs to consider, and maybe change up the base Chief altogether, change the way it's done, or just simply do away with it and start with the bobber. But anyway, that is my rant of the day. Once again, this is the Rabid Hedgehog, and this is the 5,000 plus mile deep thought of the Indian Chief Dark Horse. If you have any questions for me, please leave them in the comments below. Once again, as always, I put in the description everything about the motorcycles, from specifications and all that. Of course, mine does not match any of those specs anymore, but you know, it was all worth it in the end. At any rate, keep that shiny side up, folks, and we'll catch you on the next ride.